to the Backseat Leadership Podcast, a leadership conversation for those not in the driver's seat of their organizations. You can learn by visiting www.backseatleader.com. And now, here are the hosts of the Backseat Leadership Podcast, Geoff Kokenauer and Brad Merchant.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to our live recording. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and we can't wait to have a conversation with you tonight, as well as talk about a number of things. Brad, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I am doing great. My only regret is that we're not together.
Yeah, well, that's the sign of the times, right?
Sad. I miss you, Geoff.
Yeah, well, soon enough, you'll be in the backyard in a bonfire or whatever. That's true. You know how it goes.
That's true. That's true.
Brad, what's one thing that has been unique to your experience right now?
Ooh, one thing unique. One of the
and
things
you didn't know
that's
this
unique,
question was coming, so this is brand new on the
I
spot.
didn't. This is
Love it.
fresh off the burner. Yeah, for me, I think it
Burner?
just be
What is that?
not seeing and be able to play sports.
Yeah.
I mean, what a sick joke. I mean, the NBA playoffs will be going on right now, and I can't watch it. It's so annoying.
Well, you can watch replays.
Or I can watch The Last Dance.
You can. Has that not been great?
Been amazing.
I just certainly hope that people don't completely hate Jerry Krause. When
Yeah,
all things
they
are
do.
Done.
I already do. Sorry.
Hey, Brad, we want to do the live show so that we can interact with people, have conversations, and part of that means people have to talk, have to communicate. So we'd love to hear some learnings, some questions, things like that. What's one thing you'd like to hear in the chat, Brad?
You know what I'd like to hear? I'd like to hear really hard questions. That's what I'd like to hear. People that are just tuning in and got some hard questions that they would love for us, meaning you, to answer. I would love to see those.
I'm sure you would. Hey, Brad, if there's anything that has been clear in this season, it's this. Clarity is hard to come by when nobody has much of it. And in this season, it seems like most folks, most leaders it feels like grasping at straws for good, solid, hard information. Everybody has an opinion. Everyone has a perspective. And the hard part about that is a simple truth that if we're all honest, we've all experienced in some way, shape, or form, and that's this reality. A leader who is devoid of information struggles to make confident decisions. And Brad, if we're honest, we're far from coming up with solutions or even things that would even remotely be considered like, I don't know if you're looking for it, but I am, a silver bullet for getting through this season. We are, just like every other leader, in any seat, trying to find ways to just do more than just get through. Like, it's easy to just try and get through, and it's easy to just like survive the season. But there's something about, there's a false sense that comes from that, which is like just getting by. It's like a sense of sitting back, and somehow that's more desirable than capitalizing all of the things that are in front of us. So really what we want to do, we've talked about this, is in the midst of this to thrive and to lead as best as we possibly can in the seat and the season that we find ourselves. This would be true of any of our previous podcast episodes, but I would argue this is even more true now because of the speed and intensity with which we're having to learn in this season. So, Brad, really what we want to do in this episode is just share some learnings, invite our friends, our team to join in the conversation and share their learnings in the chat. So that's what I want to see. I want to see other people's learnings in this, because we're all simply trying to learn, flourish in the seat we're in the season we're in, and discover some new things that'll help us thrive. So that's kind of the intro, Brad. You want to add anything to that before we jump in?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think one of the things we've been talking about a lot just in our friendship is, this is a really difficult time for everyone, but especially backseat leaders. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to just get through this season. We want to learn through this season.
Sure.
And that's a really important difference between the two. One just gets through hard times, but never grows in character or in leadership competency. The other grows in all facets of life. And so that's all we want to do in our time together is we just want to share a couple of reflections that we've actually had personally. So like these are kind of born out of our own journals, so to speak. And we want to share those with people that are watching tonight because we think that they might be helpful, but I think what you said is really true. We also want to hear from our audience. So if there's reflections as you're watching this and listening to this, you're like, yeah, actually, I've thought some of the similar things. Or maybe, hey, you guys should consider this. We want to learn from you as well. So please submit those into the chat box or in the comment box. We'd love to hear from you for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Brad, we'd love to spend some time tonight learning from each other. So what's some of the things you've been learning? And kick us off. Take us in.
Yeah. Well, one of the first reflections that I've had, just as I think about my own soul and heart and leadership through this last couple of months, I've come to grips with some dark sides of Brad Merchant as I've had time to reflect on myself, ways that I really need to grow. And one of the dark sides of Brad is this. I am addicted to noise and activity and allergic to silence and stillness. So I'm addicted to noise and activity. I love doing, getting input. But I am almost allergic or averse to sitting in silence and stillness and just speaking with God or just being by myself and thinking about my own life, my own leadership. You know, Pascal is famous for saying that all of humanity's problems, well, this is a big statement. Whenever you begin the sentence by all of humanity's problems, it better be good.
Yeah.
That stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Now, of course, we know that he's kind of exaggerating, but I think his point holds true that, you know, many of our problems in our life come from the inability to reflect because we are allergic to slowing down. And why are we allergic to slowing down? It's because we're addicted to doing. We have no time for being. I have found now that my rhythms, just like you, Geoff, as we've talked, have been thrown off. I am no longer able to go to the office. Therefore, I have to be at home all the time. And one of the difficult things about working at home, I'm sure some people that are watching are like, hey, I've been doing this forever. Well, we're rookies.
Right.
And one of the difficult things about working from home is that work time and home time, kind of the lines blur together. We don't really know when one starts and when one ends. And, you know, part of the reason that it's hard to embrace stillness and to slow down is because when I'm alone in silence, what I'm tending to think about is something at work, something on my to-do list, something to do. And guess what? Maybe the same chair I'm sitting in that I usually spend time with my wife or just sit watching TV, that's actually the same chair I worked in today. Yeah. And so because my work environment, home environment have merged together, it makes it really difficult to sit and to be still. And quite honestly, Geoff, you know, as Christians, if you're not able to be still and embrace solitude, you know what that means? It means you're not going to have a great prayer life. And that's certainly been true of me. In a book I read recently that's just been so good, I recommend it to everybody watching or listening tonight, is by a pastor and author named John Stark. And the title of the book is The Possibility of Prayer. And in the book, he touches on this about stillness and solitude and how we tend to be averse to silence and therefore averse to prayer. And he says this in the book. It's an amazing quote. He says, quote, "Being active and busy is a good remedy for ignoring anxious thoughts. We stuff our fears down through activity. When I'm still, I'm suddenly vulnerable to all the things I've swept under the rug for so long.
Yeah.
The monsters of insecurities and shame come home to me during the stillness of prayer." Then he says this, just hits home for me. "Busyness is good news for those of us who want to resist stillness like the plague." And man, I got to tell you, Geoff, I've just learned that in this season, one of the reflections I've had is that it's really hard for me to be still when work and home life have really been blurred together.
Yeah, sometimes I love it when you bring quotes, because you always bring quotes. Oftentimes they come from, like, Puritan writers and things like
Dead
that.
guys.
Dead guys, for sure.
This guy's alive.
Yeah, well, then I want to find him and punch him in the face, because I don't like that quote. So true. Hey, Tyler in the chat says, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so I'm constantly thinking about advancement and change. It's actually exhausting. So totally understand that. You can listen to our last podcast that was released on Monday, and talked about the Enneagram. But this is so true. I mean, we have these tendencies towards rush, because we're out of control. Our regular rhythms are gone. And so it totally messes with you. You're like, I got to do all these things. And the Lord just invites us into that process of resting in Him. It's great.
Yep, you're right.
That's great.
So what about you, Geoff? That's my first reflection. What do you got?
Yeah, so this might be the driving thing right now for me. I guess it's a leadership learning. Is decision making is contextual and cultural. It is changing, and this part might be the most difficult part. Is it's constantly critiqued. I offer these 3 things not as a challenge, but more as a statement of reality. Here they are. So it's contextual, it's cultural. Decision making is contextual and cultural. So what works in Indiana may not be the best in New York, California, or even Ohio. What works in the exact same position in an organization in one place may not have the same effect in a different organization in a different place.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say that it's personified in church organizations, but it sure seems to be more amplified, especially these days. I have the pleasure of connecting with leaders across the country, and one consistent thing out of every conversation is there's no silver bullet for right now. Like, there's no silver bullet. And where you are and the seat you lead in has great bearing on how you decide is most effective for your leadership and those you lead. I mean, the things that people are doing around the country don't always work in every part of the country, and learning how to leverage what's best for you and the people who you lead, I think is incredibly critical. So decision making is contextual, it's cultural. It's huge. The second thing I said is it's changing. Let's be clear. Decision making is always changing. You're always tweaking stuff, making little changes and evaluating here and there. There has been so many wholesale changes that have had to be made to entire states, like entire populations. Millions of people have had to make incredible decisions. Like I said, it's not evaluating and tweaking. I mean, some of it is more and more now. But like, there is so much that are huge. I mean, at this point, we're making, we were, especially early on, a couple weeks ago, hey, you can't go to this place. You're not going to be able to do these things. And obviously things have loosened or been more nuanced now. But for sure, I mean, there's so much that goes into making those wholesale changes. And I feel like, especially now, any decision I make, I'm not just making the decision anymore. I'm making the decision and the alternative and the alternative and the alternative and the alternative. Like, you come up with 4 contingency plans for any decision you're making right now. And maybe we should have been doing that in the first place. Obviously, not every decision when we're in normal always has to be made that way, but it sure seems like that right now. So it's always changing. And this last part, this is difficult for me. It's being constantly critiqued, and maybe even more openly than normal. I'm a pretty guttural leader. I do think sometimes, but oftentimes, like, I'll make a decision based on how it feels, or how it seems, or that kind of stuff. And this can be to my detriment. It's constantly come back to the place where it seems like decision making is being evaluated more publicly than ever before. And maybe it's a sign of the times, the divisiveness of our country, all that kind of stuff. But there's this. I feel like it's a stench of arrogance almost. Like, if you're not in alignment with a given perspective, namely my perspective, it's just ridiculous, open to be ridiculed, and publicly being ridiculed. And I find it seems to be more difficult to make a decision that is widely accepted as responsible or wise. Like every single thing that our leaders saying right now, there are plenty of people who are coming up against that idea. And I'm not saying that you can't dissent. I mean, that's
right.
That's part of leadership and that kind of stuff. I just feel like it's way more open and public and difficult. All that to say, this is what I'd say. Leaders now, like never before, need to be savvy. They need to be quick, and they need to have tougher skin. And this might be the practical point, is a reduction in the level or the amount of social media access that they provide. More so than ever. I think the comparison trap is out there. I think the court of public opinion is difficult to deal with. And it's more so than ever to not just to make a decision and huddle away, but how do we make a decision, stick with it, and trust that it's going to be okay? I kind of like this quote from Colin Powell. Being responsible sometimes means, and I'm going to change it, ticking people off, right?
Yes.
That's how it's going to go sometimes. We've known that every moment of leadership, you're going to frustrate some people. But in this case, I feel like it's even more. Yeah.
It's happening all the time, isn't it? Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's good, Geoff. My another reflection that I've had is it's a tough one as well, because it's convicting but also challenging, and hopefully challenging for those watching. And it's this: now, right now, is a great time for me to become an all-purpose leader. What do I mean by that? Well, while there are so many differences between organizations being affected right now by the coronavirus implications, they all have one thing in common. And it is this: that their senior leader is, mark it down, stressed and burdened, without a doubt, no matter how big or how small the organization or the church is. And one of the questions I've been reflecting on in the past couple of days, even this week, is this: how can I make my boss's job easier right now? How can I make my boss's job easier right now? This is where the phrase all purpose comes into play.
Sure.
Now maybe my boss needs help with something that I'm not excited about or naturally good at. Now, Geoff, we just had a conversation where the audience needs to know, this is the kind of friendship I love. Is Geoff and I have the kind of friendship where we can literally give each other an emotional black eye. We can rebuke one another about something, be totally honest, and then we go out for wings the same night. I mean, that's just kind of relationship we have.
And generally, Geoff, I pay.
Yeah, you do pay, and that's why I love you. And something that, honestly, Geoff, you said to me that I just thought was so good. You said, Brad, what I find that's true of your life in leadership is that you tend to complain when you get asked to do things you're not excited about. And I got to tell you, as I've been reflecting on that, that is totally true. And I wonder how many people are watching this could say that that's true of them too. And what's odd is we are in a season, Geoff, where as we're serving as backseat leaders, we have a great opportunity to serve as utility backseat leaders, like a Swiss Army knife, that we'd be willing to help our bosses, our senior leaders, do whatever it is that they need. Maybe it's helping with some kind of video needs that we have. If you're working at a church for a Sunday morning service and you can jump in and you can help. Maybe it's creating some kind of written content for your church that you could submit and send out to people. Maybe it's a whole slew of other things that have to do with logistics or things that were never on your job description. And here's the thing I've been reflecting on. This is a great opportunity for me to do those things so that I can grow as an all-purpose leader, but ultimately that I can make my boss's job easier, right? Because at the end of the day, when we are servant leaders, that's when we're going to gain the most respect. Not when we knock some project or some event as a home run or out of the water. Now, those things are going to earn respect for sure, but what earns more respect is when your character shines through, when you are asked to do things that only a servant would do, and you do it, and you do it great. And so those are things that I'm really trying to work on.
That's really good. There's a couple comments talking about being drained, and I think what you've said is really good. The only caveat I'd say is that we have to protect ourselves as well. Like in this season, the other duties as assigned kind of role. Tyler just mentioned that in the chat. Tyler's chatting it up. We love it.
Tyler's on it. I love Tyler. I don't even know him, but he's a great guy.
But I think it's important that we do that to a point, right? There almost has to be a line, right? That okay, yes, I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to be part of this. But knowing where is that spot where I'm no longer, like, if I go and I do all of these things, I'm not going to be purposeful for anything. And we'll get to your last reflection. I think it's in there. I think that's where we kind of see some of our, where's that line? But yeah, I do think being malleable and finding a way to be that team player, I think it's pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. So Geoff, what do you got? What's your second reflection?
Yeah, and this kind of ties to the first one, but I think it's more nuanced, and I think it helps me think through things a little bit better. But it's this: prudence often seems like a caution-driven decision, but is hardly a fear-fueled choice. Now, that took me 25 minutes to put together, so I want to say it again. Prudence often seems like a caution-driven decision, but is hardly a fear-fueled choice. This comes down to like how we respond as leaders to the information that we have and the situations that we're navigating, both personally and corporately, because there's a level to where what I think and what is best for me and my family may not necessarily be what's best for the corporation and best for the organization or the group at large that I'm leading. And here's why I say it: prudence seems like a caution-driven decision, not a fear-fueled choice. I think a lot of us are fearful of making fear-fueled choices, right? Because it's almost as if the fear is going to somehow give away the power or the thoughts that we have towards a certain thing. But caution is really, really helpful, especially in situations that it's required, right? I think somebody once said that caution is in a minefield is extremely productive, but not during like a market boom. Like caution sometimes stops you from pursuing stuff well.
Yeah, that's right.
So I like the word prudence, and here's why. Prudence is defined like this: prudence is the ability to govern and discipline oneself by the use of reason. A sagacity... I can't pronounce the word there, or shrewdness in the management of affairs, skill and good judgment in the use of resources, or caution or circumspection as to danger or risk. Prudence is a whole lot more than just caution. Prudence is a whole lot more than just fear, but it could cause us to use caution in making decisions. And I think that's incredibly important in a season like this, because when we didn't have a pandemic to consider, when we didn't have all of these other people. Honestly, when we make decisions, who we decide, like I'm a youth pastor, who I would typically decide for is the students and sometimes the families of those that I'm leading. Now, when I'm making decisions, I'm thinking about those students and their parents and their grandparents and their grandparents that they're connected to or interacting with, because let's say I hold a gathering of 250 kids, that would be awesome. Now, all of a sudden, they're connected to these other groups of people who are working in different places and all that kind of stuff. And so I think prudence is huge. I love what John Ortberg said. He said, prudence is foresight and farsightedness. It's the ability to make immediate decisions on the basis of their longer range effects. And I think that was so good. Challenging to me. Because in this season, it's easy for us to go, all right, we're going to make some snap decisions because we want to be back together as a church. Or we're going to add all of this stuff to our plate without the consideration of what it's going to do to us long term. And I think that's incredibly important to us. If there's anything that I've learned through that, is this: take your time in this season. Take your time. Be thoughtful of what's going on around you and with the people you're interacting with, because the way we navigate this season could make or break the way we navigate things in the next season. We might stretch ourselves too thin right now, and the next season is going to be incredibly different. We might not stretch too far enough. We might not take enough caution, and we might do the same thing. So I like that word prudence. I'm falling in love with it right now, because I think that there's a level of both caution, wisdom, and then there's the part of like there comes a point where within prudence is, okay, now it's time to go. Now it's time to release that caution that we've been using and press forward hard. And so that's something. Prudence is an incredibly important thing.
It's a good word. You have a tattoo that says prudence, don't you?
It's right over here underneath the hairline.
Yeah.
So soon enough, it'll be revealed.
Just can't see it. Yeah, I understand. So, Geoff, a third and final reflection for me, and then we'll jump on to you.
Yeah.
Is
and then we'll do a Q&A. So if you got questions, and it doesn't have to be necessarily on the stuff we've talked about, but fire them in there. We'd love to talk about them. We got a couple in there. One from Dylan. We'll talk about self-care in a second. Go ahead.
That's awesome. Here it is. I want to do things in this season that I wish I could have done in others. So I want to do things in this season that I wish I could have done in others. Now, things are so different right now. We've talked about this, like beating the old drum. I'm working from home full time. My wife is working from home full time. We can't have many interactions with people. I can't be staring in front of the television screen watching an NBA game for 10 hours a week. I can't do that anymore. And in addition, some of us, yeah, my wife says the same thing. Some of us have more time on our hands than we have had before this season. Just the fact of the matter. It's not true of everybody, but true of some of us. And so some of the things I'm doing right now are things that I wish I could have done in previous seasons, but I just haven't had the time or the inability to do such things, such as simple, taking walks with my wife during the day. I mean, we love doing that. You know, a couple times a day, take a break. Hey, let's go on a walk, get outside, have some good conversations. Exercising and walking outside more. Been doing a lot of that. Did some of that today. Loved it. Reading more books. Geoff, you know I love to read. And this has been a time where I'm like, dude, there's some big books sitting on my shelf that I know I would not have time for when I'm in the hustle and bustle of crazy life, not at home much. I'm opening those things, and I'm going to get through them in this season. I promise you that. And you're probably going to hear a lot of more quotes from dead Puritans. I promise you that too.
Can't wait.
So on top of reading more books, journaling and reflecting on my life and leadership once a day. So that's something I've been trying to do, where every day I'm popping open my journal. I'm just reflecting. Hey, what do I think about my life, my leadership? What are ways I need to grow? Things I'm encouraged by, discouraged by. Here's what I encourage everybody that's listening or tuning in tonight. Make a list of things you'd like to do in this season and then go after them. I just wrote a blog post late last night. It's live right now, bradmerchantblog.com, where I put together, I think, a list of 7. Yeah, no kidding. I get about 2 people that visit my blog a month, and they're both my wife.
Your wife,
yeah, and you're one of them. But I put together a list of about 6 to 8 things, ways that people can grow. My passion is theology, so ways that people can grow theologically and in their leadership. I mean, there's so many organizations and institutions offering free classes, free seminars, free this, that, the other content that you're able to consume right now this season. And hey, I'd say let's make time to do that. Let's not get on the other side of COVID-19. Get back into normal life and think to ourselves, man, I wish I would have used my time better. I do not want to live with that regret and guilt. And so let's get on top of that now. Make a list. Maybe tonight you're inspired to do that. I just encourage you, get down in your journal, take out a piece of paper, write down some things that you want to do in this season that you couldn't do in any other.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really, really good. That's really, really good. I love that. Let me do my last one, and then we can get to there's some really good questions in the chat right now, and I want to interact with Dylan and Tyler, who've been asking some questions there. Here's the deal, Brad, and we've done this together as well in the last few weeks. I mean, we've had lots of conversations. This is the last one: is learn and innovate with and from others who are learning and innovating too. I think it's so tempting, I think, as a leader to just decide to come be the first one there, come up with the silver bullet, come up with the new thing, the new shiny thing, right? What can we do to somehow be the pioneer of the pandemic, right? And I think that's arrogant. I think it's prideful, because there are so many people who have all kinds of great ideas, who are coming from places that no one has always looked for. And here's what I mean by that. I think there are 3 groups of people who you need to have in your life especially when you're leading in a season like this. And these three have been true in my life at this point. They've been especially true in the last few weeks. This is first one. A cohort of colleagues. These are people who are focused professionally. They're doing the same stuff you are. I've got a group of guys and gals who I converse with every week about youth ministry, the things they're doing, the things that they're pushing towards, the new innovations, how's this changing future stuff, all those type of things. People who you're talking about the same kind of stuff, right? And learning through what they're doing. I have stolen so much stuff in this season, and I don't feel bad about it. Not at all. I don't feel bad about it at all. And mainly it's because I've just been talking with other folks who are wrestling with the same stuff, who are looking for this idea and this idea. And it's been super helpful just to glean from them. So have a cohort of colleagues. The second one is to have careful challengers. And Brad, you and I have talked about this. We've just gone through a weekend where we've spent a lot of time working through some stuff and even challenging each other on areas of our lives. You've got to have those people in your life. Like at the point where like there are people who are going to say to you, "Hey, I think you need to get over the fact you don't want to do that for your boss. I think you're not stretching far enough to be malleable and to serve them." Have those people who can say those things to you. That's really, really vulnerable. And as a type 8 on the Enneagram, I don't want anything to do with that. But I know that I absolutely need that in my life for people to say, "Hey, you're working way too much. You're working way too much. Go be with your wife." You know what I mean? Like I need that in my life. And I think you all did that last week. And so that's number 2. Cohort of colleagues, careful challengers, and compassionate caregivers. These are the people who are going to stop. They're not going to ask you how's your stream? How many Zoom meetings do you have? Do you have enough Zoom meetings in your life? Have you been connecting with all the people these are the people who are going to say, "How's your soul?" Like they're going to stop and say, "I don't want to hear fine. I don't want to hear good. I don't want to hear, okay." Like I want to hear it. And then I'm going to ask you more questions because I want to really know, like, how is your soul in this? I think there's something that we have to realize as leaders is this: every single one of us, and not just leaders, people, we have gone through, to whatever degree, a traumatic event. And what do I mean by that? Not that everybody has lost someone to COVID-19. Not that everybody knows someone who has COVID-19. But what I mean is that our norms are completely different for the most part. Our control is completely different for the most part. Our regular rhythms, as we've talked about already tonight, gone for the most part. So we need to realize that that's a reality. And there are certain things that we've lost. When our state first shut down, I was getting ready to go to a regional basketball game, and then it turned into I was going to go broadcast the regional basketball game, and then it turned in there's no regional basketball game. It's postponed to the point where now it's completely canceled. The NBA is canceled, and you have nothing to watch, which is why you keep asking us about shows to watch. It's great.
Sure.
And like so we have like as little as those things matter in the grand scheme of things, they still affect us, and they affect us in such a way that we have to take consideration for that. And so especially for pastors, like your charge is to care for people, to pastor people, but who's pastoring you? You know, I think that's huge. That's the last thing I'd say. And now I'm going to sneeze on live television or video, and it's just great. It's just wonderful. You want to add anything to that before we get to questions? Because we've got some.
No, I think that's good. I think this time has made me value friendships more, especially those friends that, quite honestly, reach out like you, Geoff, and do heart checks and are not okay with me being comfortable.
Right.
And those are the kind of friends and colleagues that I value. So you bring out some good points.
That's good. A couple of questions here in the chat, and this kind of goes together. So, Brad, I'm going to ask you because I'd love to hear your perspective. We go to the question about how can I make my lead's job easier? Looking to be servant leaders. What's the self-care boundary? And then the follow-up question from another guy is this: what is your guys' take on adding things to your ministry that might not be sustainable when we get back to getting together? and how much time and energy we should be investing in those two things. And so take that how you want, but I think those two are connected. So what would you say to those two questions?
Yeah, well, let me tackle, what should we do now that may not be sustainable long term? That's a really good question, and honestly, all of us as leaders, especially backseat leaders, have wrestled with that question. There's a really good article by Andy Crouch on Praxis and their website. It's incredible. He said after COVID-19 started and everybody shut down, everybody and every organization became a startup, which means all of us instantly began to think like entrepreneurs. What are some new ways we can reach our people, engage with people, especially for us in the church, Geoff? I know you've thought a lot about this, but how can I engage with the people that I've been charged to disciple and to oversee? And I think we need to be careful that we don't begin thinking, I can't do this creative thing or this creative thing or this creative thing because it won't last. Mm-hmm. You know what? This is a unique season. And the way I've thought about it is, we're going to do some new and different things, certainly doing that at my church, things that we'll probably never do in the future. However, you know what I've found is there's some things we've started to do that I've thought, actually, why were we never doing this in the first place? So right. I think there's new creative things that we should try to do. We shouldn't stress ourselves out thinking, am I going to do this forever? Should I start doing it because I won't do it forever? Listen, start doing it. It's a unique season. Who knows? It might stick with you later on. You never know.
Yeah. That's really good. I would tackle it this way. The first is, as far as the line goes, if it is still like, there's a part where in this, I was interacting with somebody on Twitter and I said, my first couple weeks of this thing was trying to figure out what the baseline is. What is the baseline for our ministry to connecting with people and connecting with students and giving them a place to connect and that kind of stuff. And now has been a whole lot more of like ramping up pastoral care, that kind of stuff. There was a bit of a couple days where I was like, okay, I have got to just stop and shut it off. And so I think that that's important. I think having those, I think it's a personal thing. And I think you have to put those guidelines in place, right? So that you can maintain some sense of sanity and peace and connection with those who are important and those people who are most important. As far as like adding things, the thing I would just nuance is this. One of the ways that we have, especially like in the church necessarily, that we've done things well is connecting with people and trying to reach out to them, not just to provide content for them, which I think we could argue the Western Church has become prominent in just promote content, experience. And honestly, there's a part of this where maybe the conversation should have been tool, growth tool, connect. And so I think when it comes to adding stuff and what's okay and what's not okay, I don't know if there's a specific thing that I'd say this shouldn't or this should, but we're doing things now to connect with people in ways we've never thought we should, or we thought we had time, and now we do. Like random phone calls or random text messages or, hey, let's set up this call, or, we're extending ourselves in those ways, and I think those are productive. The last part I'd say to it is like, again, I think slower and using prudence to decide what you do is most important, because what am I doing now that I cannot do long term, and what am I doing now that I for sure can do long term? I just think that those questions maybe help frame those conversations.
Yeah, that's good.
Next question. What's your advice for those that overshoot constantly with big goals and dream big, maybe setting too many goals or a to-do list, but never accomplish much or stick to them during this season? This person is asking for a friend. And follow-up, question is in reference to your good wisdom in aiming to do things during the season that we wouldn't normally do or get to do, whether we get to be in the home or work. You want to take that one on?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, something I've kind of told myself a lot is this: dream big, but start small. Dream big, but start small. When you do the reverse, you get really discouraged really quick, because you end up not having big ideas. Instead, there are small ideas that you can achieve, and you achieve them and you don't feel great because they weren't big in the first place.
Right.
And so I think for people in this season that say, man, I really want to grow, I don't want to waste my time in the midst of COVID-19, what I would say to you is set some goals. You need to set some goals. If you don't
That's
set
good.
goals, you will drift out into the ocean of nothingness and boredom. And you will look back at your season that we're in currently, and you'll say, man, I wish I would have used my time better. So set some goals. Don't set too many. Kind of a rule of thumb for me is I'm not setting more than 3 goals. I'm setting 3 goals max, and
Yeah.
then I'm gonna run after those, and then start small. For me, there's a online class that I really wanted to go to. I linked to on my blog on ethics that I thought, man, this would be really good for me to go through. There's like 17 lectures or something like that, and you know what I'm doing? I said I'm going to take one a week. When I'm mowing the grass, I'm going to listen to a message on ethics, and that's a way that I can start small, but yet I'm dreaming big. I want to accomplish this big thing to grow as a leader, but I'm taking small steps towards that big goal. I think that's important for all of us, so we don't get burnt out or discouraged. Anything else you'd add to that, Geoff? You've thought about this quite a bit.
Just that sounds almost painful. I mean, ethics for 17 hours is.
It's amazing, Geoff.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I think that's really, really good.
Yeah.
And likewise, I think the question for me has been, like, how do we establish new normals? Because as abnormal as this season is, and as disorienting as this season has been, like, I got to orient myself to something. And so goals are good, or a regular schedule is good, or having some norms that are a part of your regular week, regular day. It helps establish some of those rhythms and some of those normalcy, those orienting things that are in our lives to keep us going down some sort of straight and narrow, or keeping sanity, I suppose. That's good. I just said that's good about the thing I just said, which is
You did. You
arrogant and
did.
prideful.
Self-promotion. It's okay.
So, last couple questions here. Unless there's more, feel free to throw more in the chat, because we've got about 10, 15 more minutes. 10 minutes. We do have one thing that we've got to do, Brad, that we always do for every podcast, which is the one thing, and we'll get to it in a second, and you're doing it. I'm putting you on the spot. So there's that.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
If and when we are faced with continuing this kind of communication, learning, socializing, what thoughts do you have about long-term thinking, and what have you experienced in this situation that should continue? And we talked a little bit about that. I'll go first, since you're going to do the one thing in a minute. If and when we're faced with continuing this kind of communication, learning, socializing, what thoughts do you have about long-term thinking? I've said it this way. What was true in your previously known normal that needs to come into your new normal? What was not true in your previously known normal that needs to make its way into your new normal? And what was true that needs to not show up ever again and die? One of the things I think that is very much true is that there is a creativity for connection in every human being. That when we want connection and when we want to do those things, we get really creative really quick. And the second part is the intentionality of connection has been huge. And I think that both of those things are great for the human spirit. And I think that both of those things are better for having a better life. And those are some things that we've done. In the time that we didn't have COVID-19, admittedly, I didn't schedule time to have certain communication with family, whatever those things that are distant. I just I'll talk to him when I talk to him. But there's an intentionality now, right? We schedule these things sometimes. Like we try to, we're going to get together at this time, at this place, whatever. And so that intentionality, I think, is incredibly important. But then the creativity of it, we can't do this, but we could do this, and we can't make that work, but we can make this work. I think those things are critical. And when it comes to leadership, this is maybe the professional side of all of this, is that we are capable, we are so much more capable than sometimes we give ourselves credit for, to delegate and to find creative solutions. So like empowerment and helping and getting other people to help find solutions, even though especially in the church, they're not necessarily staff, but finding those other folks who can come and be a part of that conversation, I think has always been there. We've just never leveraged it. And so I think that some of those things are critical. Brad, what would you say?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I just think we're learning right now that when human beings do not have interaction, meaningful physical interaction with other human beings, there's no social connectivity, we begin to decay as human beings. And Geoff, we would argue that is God given. That is a part of what it means to be made in the image of God, that we long to live in communion and fellowship with other people. And I think, Geoff, just especially in our context, anybody watching this who is a church leader, something that I'm really praying for the people in my church is that they would long and grow in thankfulness for their local congregation like they never have before.
Those
and
people
man,
who
Geoff,
are in your life.
Totally. And it's going to be an amazing day when we gather together again on Sundays to worship together. It's going to be amazing. Can't wait for that. But in the meantime, I think it's important that we continue to recognize, hey, this longing that I have is God-given, and it's actually a really good thing.
Yeah. That's super good. Great stuff. Lots of great questions tonight. Thanks for being a part of the chat on Facebook, and love that. Brad, we always do this thing called the one thing, and I'm putting you on the spot because, well, I am. So, Brad, we always do this thing called the one thing. This is the one thing that has hit you or you've been reading. And since you already offered a book, you can't do that. Here is the one thing. My dad just texted me and said, my mom wants to know who's going to win the 2021 World Series. But you don't like baseball, so you can't answer that question. The answer is the Detroit Tigers.
I would have said the Houston Astros, but then after they cheated, I can no longer say that.
Well, that's good because they suck anyway. So, Brad, let's do this. What's the one thing that has inspired you lately to be a better leader?
Now, you're going to hate me because I'm referring to a kind of book. But it's okay. It's okay. I'm not referring to a book, so I'm not breaking the rule.
You can't resist.
Anybody that's listened to our podcast for any amount of time, this is our friendship. I talk about books. Geoff talks about everything else, basically. So I read books. Geoff does a million other things. So here's how I've been encouraged to be a better leader. By reading really good biographies lately. Biographies on men and women that have lived long before me, that have journeyed through this life, have sojourned through this life, and have learned some lessons that have all been compiled down into a book form. Here's what amazes me. I'm currently reading a biography on the Bishop J.C. Ryle, who some might be familiar with his books. He wrote a book on holiness that was unbelievable, and an incredible preacher and writer. But he lived for about 60-some years, I believe, and passed away because of a disease. And when I look at his book, it's 150 pages long, a biography. Some guy did a whole study on his life, wrote it. His whole life is summarized in 150 pages.
Wow.
I mean, that is so humbling to think that, not Geoff, you and I probably won't have somebody write a biography on us, but if they do,
for sure not me.
It would be summarized in 100 pages or less. And that's humbling.
Yeah.
And there's something that we can learn from the lives of people that have gone before us. And so I just encourage you, if you're watching or listening to this, man, dig into a really good biography. There's so many out there. There's one recently I read on the life of Dallas Willard, who has impacted a lot of people in the area of spiritual disciplines and spiritual formation. The title of the book's Becoming Dallas Willard. And that was so encouraging. There's a lot of others that could be recommended you could find online. But I just encourage you, read a biography, study the life of someone, see their flaws because they tend to expose your own, and learn from their life so you could be a better leader in person.
That's awesome. I kind of knew that as soon as I asked that question, we'd get a book. And then I kind of knew that when I asked that question, we'd get a book about a dead guy. So I'm not surprised.
That happened.
Surprised. That's great. Hey, Brad, we do this every other week. The first and third Monday of every week, a new Backseat Leadership podcast comes out. We're currently in between two. The first of our Enneagram series, our second Enneagram series.
And if you're watching this, you need to tune in. Listen to Geoff dropping some dimes and nuggets on the Enneagram and how it applies to your leadership. I got to tell you, when I was sitting there and listening to you talk about it, I was so impacted and so equipped to be a better leader. You need to listen to that.
Well, our Twins fan, Tyler Rowland, who has confessed to being a Enneagram 3, can jump back. It's on the first run of it, which came out on Monday. Second one comes out next Monday. And it's the conversation when Brad talks is usually a lot better. So be a part of that. And again, first and third Mondays, when there's a fifth Monday, Brad, we do an interview. So it's totally fun to be a part of that. Brad, any parting words?
Guys, it's been so fun to hang out tonight. I think something that I've been encouraging, I hope you've been encouraging as well, is, hey, reflect. What can you learn in this season? Yeah. Take some time. Do it today, this week, but take some time to reflect. How can I grow as a person in the midst of this season? I think that's important.
It's really, really good. Hey, friends, this has been the live recording version of the Backseat Leadership Podcast. Thanks so much for being a part of it, and we'll see you not this next Monday, but the following Monday on the next episode of the Backseat Leadership Podcast.
To the Backseat Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe and leave a review to help other backseat leaders join the conversation. For more information, visit www.backseatleader.com.